All right. Hey, everyone. If you want to come in, there's a few spots in the front row. Don't be scared, we don't bite. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the first, actually, second, I'm wrong, for the second instance of the BitVM ACK working group. I'm Alexei, I'm the co founder of BOB. Dom is my co founder and CTO. We have a few other members in this room of this institutional working group for BitVM adoption. A big thanks also to our sponsors and partners at Ankr and Boundless. Today, we're going to talk about BitVM. What does it mean? Why should we care? What does this mean for Bitcoin DeFi? What does this mean for Ethereum? Very big question. I'm very excited and surprised, to be fair, to see such a good attendance at an Ethereum event for a Bitcoin side event. Um, we're going to start with a brief introduction to BitVM and also why this is relevant, kind of give a short intro to the rest of the day. We're going to have Robin Linus, the inventor of BitVM, give a brief overview of the history of BitVM, BitVM 1, BitVM 2, BitVM 3, and what we can expect in the near future. And then we'll have panels and fireside chats with Bitcoin LSTs, and we'll discuss what it means for Bitcoin staking. We'll talk about operational and institutional questions, what it means for LPs, node operators, staking providers, and of course also infrastructure. So without further ado, one last thing. So we have this thing, this is an experiment. Please do not abuse it, otherwise we'll have to turn it off. We have an internal bet running. I said we'll manage. People bet against me. The idea is that during the talks, during the panels, you get the chance to ask questions. It helps us to make sure that we respond and help you get to know BitVM better. And the first question is actually from me, right? We have some special merch from Bob. If you ask good questions, you get something really cool from us in return for the time invested. There is air conditioning in this room. In the other room, well, not so much, I guess. And without further ado, if we can get the slides projected, that would be super helpful. There we go. All right, so BitVM, right? Why do we want BitVM? Well, we want to take Bitcoin and put it back at the heart of DeFi, and there's also other use cases you can do with BitVM. There's been a lot of research that has spawned after the first paper came out. Today, we'll talk primarily, I think, about DeFi, but for the rest of the event, I think there'll be more questions and more discussions as well. Well, why Bitcoin? Bitcoin is bigger than everything else combined. These numbers are probably outdated. Bitcoin is really bigger. And if you zoom out, right, we're today in Cannes at ECC. We all know each other, right? It's a crypto event. We all know Solana, Ethereum, Arbitrum, Base. But if you step outside our industry, what do people really know about crypto? They know it's Bitcoin. And in 90% of the cases, when the news talks about crypto, they talk about BTC. And people probably know Bitcoin. The majority of the population knows Bitcoin. ETH, probably anything beyond that, very difficult. And if we look at Bitcoin's adoption in DeFi, it is quite big, right? We have multiple billions of dollars of BTC wrapped, deposited, staked in different ways with different trust assumptions in DeFi today. But it's still only a teeny tiny bit of the entire Bitcoin in circulation. And if we look at Ethereum and its market cap, and then we compare that to how much DeFi TVL we have, the ratio is around 30%. Now, if you look at Bitcoin, we are at like less than 1% right now. And that's why we believe, and I think most people in our industry, in the Bitcoin space, agree that unlocking Bitcoin for DeFi is one of the biggest opportunities of the decade. But, well, why has it not happened yet? And the absence of BitVM is probably one of the answers here. For the last 10 years, Bitcoin has been at the forefront of crypto adoption, right? The majority of people in this room probably bought their first Bitcoin before they bought anyone else. Who in this room, maybe a raise of hands, got into crypto not through Bitcoin, but through something else? Okay, it's increasing from event to event. I maybe won't ask that question next time. But outside of this room of experts and degens who are really deep into crypto, the majority of the population still gets into crypto through Bitcoin. But you can't do much with BTC, right? If you want to use Bitcoin for anything more than payments and sending it around, which is a great and perfect use case, Bitcoin excels at that and it solved the problem it set out to solve perfectly. But if you want to do anything else, you have to go to a centralized provider like Binance or Coinbase, which may be okay, or you have to go to other networks. And for the last 10 years, what has happened is that users, capital, talent has basically left Bitcoin and gone to other industries. And now within the Bitcoin community, we've started talking about the Bitcoin Renaissance, where people will start coming back. And Bitcoin L2s are arguably the way to scale Bitcoin, but not just scale, but make Bitcoin more useful, right? And even within the Maxi community, I think we have managed to reach consensus that ZK rollups, real Bitcoin L2s, are the way to improve that. But, well, why don't they exist today? And why haven't they succeeded yet? Why is Ethereum still dominant? Why is Solana still dominant? Why is there no Bitcoin L2 that is able to keep up and has overtaken these guys in the last 10 years? Well, there's 3 reasons. It's very, very hard to build a new ecosystem and a new chain, specifically if you want to have Bitcoin security. And one of the main problems, and this is what we're going to focus on today, it's about Bitcoin security and bridges, right? Up until very recently, we just did not have the tools and methodologies to achieve full Bitcoin rollups. We could do multi-sigs, we could do very fancy big multi-sigs, but that was it. It was always trust the majority of signers and you'll be fine. Whereas Ethereum had rollups and made a lot of progress on that front. But finally, with BitVM, and we'll spend the rest of the day talking about this, we have the blueprint to achieve this. And of course, there's questions of ecosystem and liquidity and whatnot, but security and bridges is definitely one of the biggest blockers, and why only now we see Bitcoin L2s emerging and really positioning themselves in a way that they can compete with the rest of the ecosystem. So this is my last slide, and then I'll hand over to Dom. Dom will give you a very brief introduction into BitVM, warming you up for Rob and Linus, who will then really take you on a journey. Very briefly, right, before even talking about anything technological, why should you care? Well, BitVM, oversimplified, is essentially native Bitcoin on Bitcoin L2 using fraud proofs, right? And the same way that ETH and Arbitrum, we call it ETH. We don't call it ARB ETH or OP ETH or base ETH. We call it ETH. In the same way that ETH on these ETH L2s is ETH, native ETH, Bitcoin on Bitcoin L2s powered by BitVM will be BTC, right? It will be the same security model, very, very similar, and it'll give you the confidence that this is indeed non-custodial, native Bitcoin that you can use on the platforms. And this is why you should care about BitVM, because once we have this, and this is coming, it's going to get very, very interesting in the industry, because suddenly Bitcoin can do all the things that all the other chains are doing right now, and then the race is on for who has more distribution. And one just very brief point to mention, BitVM Ankr is an institutional working group that aims to accelerate adoption of BitVM. BitVM Alliance is the technical working group that has been founded earlier than BitVM Ankr. The reason why we've started doing this is that we saw that a lot of node operators, institutions, staking providers that usually are calling ETH, Solana, and other networks their home are very interested in Bitcoin, but they had no way to get informed to be up to speed with what's going on BitVM. And so we founded this working group with research partners and institutional partners and DeFi partners, and keep expanding it with the goal to spread the information knowledge of BitVM, get people to run it, get feedback of, well, how should this thing actually be developed? Because we can build something, but if no node can run it because it's so painful and really ignores all principles of business, well, then it's not going to work. And if you're interested, if you're an institutional staking provider, custodian, node operator, solver, market maker, and want to get involved, or DeFi protocol, definitely check out the website bitvm-acc.org. You can apply to join. We're setting up some requirements and asks for you to actually participate, and we'll be growing this in the near future as we see more progress. And without further ado, Dom.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexei. Hi, I'm Dom. I'm the other founder at BOB. And the microphone? Okay, seems to be working. I mostly do tech, and I'll do a quick intro basically to BitVM and what that means. I'm going to talk about 2 things mostly, like high level, how do we construct a bridge with BitVM, and then opportunities to participate, mostly tailored to institutions, but so you could get an understanding of how that works. Can we get my microphone somehow? Yeah? Okay, cool. So very, very trivially, BitVM, on a smart contract chain, like any VM chain on BOB, like to do like a simple multiplication, like 10 times A, is like one step in the virtual machine, very simple. In Bitcoin, not so much. One of the big problems is just for a simple thing like a multiplication, we need to do additions, and it's a lot of steps. And running things natively in Bitcoin script is a problem, so we can't really implement any kind of light clients on Bitcoin directly. Bitcoin script has a lot of limitations, but luckily with BitVM we can work around these problems. And before going into the details, like most focus on BitVM right now is on trustless Bitcoin bridges. So how do we get Bitcoin to other chains? And in the future is like true Bitcoin rollups. And there's also a bunch of companies that already work on this true Bitcoin rollups problem. Why is this Bitcoin bridges so important? Can I get a show of hands who was affected by FTX or on some other centralized exchange hacks? Few people. Oh, okay, cool. Everybody does very good self-custody. The good thing with BitVM is basically we have this one-of-n trust assumption, so means instead of trusting a whole bunch of different parties, we just need to rely that a single party is actually honest. And the whole point of doing Bitcoin and doing blockchain in the first place is that we want to reduce trust and we want to replace it with cryptography where we can and economic security where it's needed. In BitVM, we do that basically in kind of 3 steps. If you build a bridge and some additions on the withdrawal. So you have like a setup phase, you deposit some Bitcoin, you withdraw it, and then there's like a challenging and proving if necessary. In the setup, we have a thing called operators in BitVM, and operators are the ones that facilitate the entire bridging process. We have a committee. Committees right now necessary because we don't have covenants in Bitcoin. Means we cannot put conditions on how existing Bitcoin transactions can really be spent. This is a workaround, but so BitVM works without Bitcoin forks right now. So that's a good thing, but we need a committee. And they set up this BitVM program and deploy it on Bitcoin, or well, they do the preparations. And the BitVM program is nothing else than we're gonna lock up some Bitcoin here that we're then gonna mint on BOB or another chain. And this BitVM program implements the rules around how this Bitcoin can be withdrawn again. Under the hood, this is a Bitcoin transaction graph, so there's many, many Bitcoin transactions that are connected. I'm sure Robin's going to talk a bit more on that, so I'll treat this as a black box. To actually deposit Bitcoin, you then have a user who sends Bitcoin to the BitVM program. Technically, they're already giving like a transaction to like the operators and the committee to sign. But again, we're looking at this very high level. So Bitcoin is deposited by the user on Bitcoin. And then we have a BitVM bridge contract on the BOB side. And then we're minting the Bitcoin to the BOB in the user wallet. And it's all very simple. The interesting part in BitVM, and the thing that we couldn't do before, is withdrawals with security, with Bitcoin security. So what we do here is user sends the bridge Bitcoin to the bridge contract, locks it there, and then the operators that we used in the setup phase, one of these operators now needs to go and process this withdrawal. This is where the one of n comes in. Like we need one of these operators that participated in the setup to do the withdrawal. And we don't need a multisig of all of these operators, right? So just one. One operator, they're gonna send Bitcoin to the user. This is the pre-funding, the prepayment that we have in BitVM. And then the operator claims back the Bitcoin that was locked in the BitVM program. And it does that by constructing like a proof that says, oh, on BOB, we were locking and burning the Bitcoin. I've also sent Bitcoin to the user wallet, so the user has their Bitcoin already back. And with that proof, presenting it to the BitVM program, we say, oh, now I can get this money out. But it might be that the operator is trying to cheat. So the operator, very similar to how like fraud proofs work in Base or Arbitrum, might submit a wrong claim. And because Bitcoin is very expensive to do things on-chain, we don't want to verify fully everything all the time, but we want to do it optimistically. So what can happen is operator does an incorrect claim, and then we have this new challenger role, and the challenger actually now checks, oh, was this actually correct burned? Was the correct amount Bitcoin sent to the user? And if not, the challenger can actually start challenging the operator, and then we go through this very elaborate process of, then we go through the process of fault proving this part, like this challenge by the operator. So we have like a timeout on the withdrawal, and that's about it. Under the hood, how BitVM 2 looks like and how we can, we can't do the full verification in Bitcoin itself, so we need to use a trick. We have like the BitVM program all the way over here, and BitVM program implements like this proof of, things have been burned here and Bitcoin transaction be sent. That's part of the program, and then we produce a ZK proof from that, and we have a snark verifier. That's actually a bit less than a gigabyte. This is an old slide. Some optimization's been made. And then we, because we can't commit like all of this data to Bitcoin on chain, what we do is we split up the BitVM program into many, many parts, and we use the output of the first program as the input to the next one. And then it's small enough that we can actually execute one part of this program on chain in Bitcoin script. So the trick is like when the operator makes its claim that they can withdraw the Bitcoin, we can check if there's anything wrong with the proof and then tell the operator like, okay, look, your proof is wrong and it's wrong here. Now let's submit actually this part on chain and execute this part of the snark verifier on chain on Bitcoin in Bitcoin script with full Bitcoin security. And that's kind of the trick of BitVM and how we can get to full Bitcoin security. So operator must reveal this part of the code, and we disprove it, directly on Bitcoin, and that's the TLDR, skipping over many implementation details, but that's how we can get to Bitcoin security and verifying any program really on Bitcoin or any program that can be compressed into a snark verifier. BitVM opportunity. So this was kind of the technical intro, but now why is this actually interesting and how could you participate? So there's five ways to participate roughly. First one is user. You can bridge Bitcoin over to BOB and other chains. You basically can participate in DeFi in a way that you can participate with like ETH on Arbitrum or Base or in BOB. This is really for anyone like LPs, funds, users, anyone that wants to participate in DeFi and you want to get full on Bitcoin security. So while you have this BitVM BTC on BOB, you can always go through the Bitcoin security mechanism. So you can always, withdraw your Bitcoin back to Bitcoin. Then we have operators, and in our case, we actually split up operators into two roles. So in the technical side, right? So the operator did two things, like it did the whole transaction processing setup, and the other big thing it did was send Bitcoin to the user initially. And the operator LP part in our design is they're the entity that only sends the Bitcoin. So this is mostly for market makers and funds looking to earn yield on Bitcoin. Probably this on-chain transaction verification right now is relatively expensive. So Babylon did a mainnet test. It costs about $16,000 to run the on-chain fraud proofs. That means if you bridge on Bitcoin, that's mostly for LPs, and so bridging in and out, mostly worth if you bridge more than 10 Bitcoin. So you would use like an alternative, like intent-based bridge, like a swap that we have at BOB as well. But the LPs is really like market makers that would facilitate this pegging out. Then we have the operator nodes. This is like constructing the transaction graph, processing everything. Operator nodes is like if you're running validators, if you're running other complex infrastructure, then operator nodes is exactly the way that you would come in. It's low capital requirements. Is usually less than 2 Bitcoin, depends a bit on the parameterization. but it's a fixed amount of Bitcoin, and you would basically be running bridging infrastructure. Then we have the challengers. Challengers are the ones that check if everything ran correctly. I guess there's usually two ways that we've seen how that can run as a business. Either you earn some Bitcoin on doing the actual challenges when it arises, or sometimes there's also like this fixed price subscription model, fraud proving as a service, and that's usually the same people that would run operator nodes can also run the challengers, because it basically requires running complex infra. And last but not least, governance committee. This is essentially a workaround of governance, and this can basically be run by anyone. You want to have a few entities that you trust as a bridge to run this, but this is a great avenue for decentralization where people can run this as a service relatively easily and verify that all of these BitVM transactions are run correctly. Cool, and this is actually real, so it's happening. We have the BitVM testnet is now live. There's actually a whole bunch of operators that, or it's live on testnet. There's a whole bunch of operators, so Amber, Ankr, Fiamma, Lombard, Luganodes, P2P, Rockaway, Saddler, Solve, and UTXO. They're all running operators now on BOB testnet. If you want to participate, feel free to reach out. You can run these operators as well. One of the big things of BitVM is what we're trying to do with BitVM Ankr is to make it real, and it's only going to be real if people are actually using it and can build on it. And yeah, so we're quite happy that we have all these people running it now. And cool thing about the BitVM Ankr testnet that's live now is many operators. We have also like 3 other kind of cool things that I, as a technical person, super happy about. There's this challenge data that we need to keep around, which we're putting on Ethereum blobs, so you get a lot of censorship resistance for keeping this data around. It's one of the open kind of issues or problems, like how do you solve that in practice in BitVM? The operator split is new. Standard BitVM combines these two things where you need to have a lot of Bitcoin and you need to run complex infrastructure, so we split it up into two roles. This is unique to the BitVM Ankr testnet. And then collateral reuse is very useful for node operators, so you can keep the same amount of Bitcoin around. This is research that CTO did, and we implemented it in our testnet as well. Cool. This is kind of the intro, technical intro, the different roles and what they're doing. Are there any questions? I guess there are some questions here. We have some time for questions, right? Awesome, cool. How do you use my native BTC through BitVM on Arbitrum, sir? Well, you would bridge, I guess, your either somebody implements like a BitVM bridge directly on Arbitrum, or you would bridge it from BOB to Arbitrum. Then you have some extra bridge assumptions. So let's say you would use layer 0 Chainlink to bridge the Bitcoin from BOB to Arbitrum, or you have a native bridge on Arbitrum. That being said, actually verifying Arbitrum in BitVM is not really possible because you can't verify Ethereum consensus in BitVM. Ethereum is not like client friendly, so you need some workarounds for that. Okay, technical trust assumptions in BitVM bridging. Yes, the technology is new and partially quite complex, but you can verify everything yourself if you wanted to. So the way that we build it, basically we use RISC-0 and Boundless as a ZKVM. I think the biggest lift is probably the snark verifier that's implemented in Bitcoin script. That is a huge lift from the BitVM Alliance, so the technical team that is building BitVM. BitVM Alliance is a few parties. It includes Fiamma, it includes Babylon, it includes us, Citrea, Alpen. So there's many teams that work on the same repository. So you get some support from many teams. Why is the Groff 16 snark verifier so large? Because it's implemented in Bitcoin script. In Bitcoin script, we can't even do multiplications, so we need to do it with additions, things like hashing functions. are pretty difficult to do in Bitcoin script as well. So that's why it gets so extremely large. So the way that it works is you write a Rust program that generates the proof, but then the snark verifier is actually written in Bitcoin script. And that's why it's very large. When mainnet? Mainnet, hopefully, if for the BitVM Ankr one that we're building at BOB, that is scheduled for this year. Q4 is what we're targeting. I say that as an engineer, very cautious about timelines, but yeah, we have the testnet is live. The snark verifier that's written in BitVM and Bitcoin script, that's going through audit right now. So most of complexity is in the clients. But yeah, I'm actually quite confident that us and a few of the other teams that are building on BitVM as well, all gonna launch this mainnet this year. Is BitVM EVM compatible? Yeah, no, they're quite different. So BitVM is a technique to verify stuff on Bitcoin, and really we use BitVM to bridge Bitcoin over to other chains. BOB is fully EVM compatible. So once Bitcoin is on BOB, like you have full EVM compatibility, you can do anything with it. You can put it into Uniswap, Euler, other lending protocols on BOB. You can bring it cross-chain wherever you want. BitVM itself, like if you want to build on BitVM itself, that is, you would probably write like a program in Rust that compiles to SP1 or RISC-0, ZKVM. That's a lot heavier lift than writing a smart contract in EVM. Initial deposit BitVM. Yes, that one is mostly dictated by kind of the transaction fees if you want to do the challenge. So it's mostly worth it to deposit into BitVM if it's a big enough amount to actually make it worthwhile the fraud proving cost. So let's say you pay $16,000 for the fraud proof. If you only bridge in like $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, you're not going to pay $16,000 to recover you $1,000 of Bitcoin. So initial deposit makes sense if it's a large amount. And the way we think about it is have two things running side by side. BitVM Bridge is the asset that has maximum security, maximum decentralization. You get full-on Bitcoin security if you need to. Get a bunch of people with a lot of Bitcoin to bridge that over to BOB in like large sizes. So similar to how RapBTC works, it's mostly big parties that bridge over like 100 or 300 Bitcoins at a time. In parallel, have a intent-based bridge where normal users can swap. So the people that bridged over Bitcoin via BitVM, they can supply liquidity on the BOB side, and then normal users can swap their Bitcoin for the BitVM asset. And the way that the swap works, what we call BOB Gateway, and the intent-based bridge is that is super fast. That should be extremely cheap, so you can bridge over like $100 worth of Bitcoin easily. But while it's like fast and cheap, you have more of a centralization trade-off, but it's only during the duration of the swap. So within like half an hour, you lose all that risk, and then you get a full-on BitVM verified Bitcoin back in BOB. One more. Okay. If I hack the bridge, do I get a back bounty? That's a great question. Maybe, I don't know. We don't have a bug bounty yet set up for BitVM. I'm pretty sure we're gonna run something once it lands on mainnet. You gotta follow the progress, and then we'll see about that. Cool. Any further questions? All right, well, I mean, there's some more there, but I'm gonna be around, so you can ask me more questions if you want to go into technical details as well. And, yeah. Thank you.